All right. Hello. Welcome. Thank you for coming. This is the recording Answers about Mini Jerseys for Beginners. So don't be embarrassed because we all began somewhere, right? Nobody starts out knowing everything. Some of us are lucky to have grown up with cattle, but that was not me. So I completely understand that you've got a lot of questions and I really do want to hear them. Melsetic from the PMJS board, as well as myself, the president of the board, to be able to answer your questions. And then we do have an experienced person with us, Laura, and we have a brand new person, Andrea. So we're hoping that you enjoy our presentation. So we've got this kind of broken down into some sections and we'll move fairly quickly, but I want to make sure that you have a good foundation of information and then invite you to go and watch our other videos over at Purebred Mini Jersey Society on our YouTube channel. We've got one for just about everything you could think of. PMJS is a registry, but it's more than just a registry. We're actually a community, a very welcoming community of breeders and owners who want to connect with other breeders and owners because we all need each other, right? All right, here's our board. They all are willing to mentor and to help you. So if you see someone that's in your area, even if you're in Canada, we do have someone on our board that can help you. Most of us will keep our mentoring though because of the commitment to members of PMJS. So feel free to ask questions, but if you want some really in-depth long-term help, then you'll want to become a member. Okay, so how do you get started? How do you find your cow? Where do you look? It can be a little overwhelming, honestly. The market is super competitive. I think, ladies, have you been getting a lot of questions, people asking and looking for mini jerseys?
All the time.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, and sometimes it seems like I'm getting a 15 to 20 contacts a day from email and phone messages, referrals, and I just don't have enough cattle for everyone, even though I wish I did. So the places that you can look when you're shopping is you can post in Facebook that you're looking. You can do it in search of, be careful not to use those terms that they flag. For some reason, they'll flag the word heifer. If you try to say anything like sale or use a $sign, that'll get flagged. So just be kind of generic and say that you're in search of a milk maker, something like that, in the area that you're at. There are 6 regional groups that PMJS manages, and there are 2 in Canada as well. So to find those, you're going to type in what's in the quotes there. The US region dash Mini Jersey miniature dairy cattle will pull up all 6 of them. And then you can pick the one closest to you, which will make shipping a lot less expensive because we'll get into that, but it can be really, really spendy. You can also search in the Purebred Mini Jersey Society Facebook group. And we have a page, but that's mostly for business type posts. So the society Facebook group is a little more casual. And if someone has cattle that are registered, they can post them there. And you can look for them there as well. Your local Facebook homesteading groups. So anything in your area, if you start searching for cattle, milk for sale, any of those kinds of things, you might be able to find a dairy or someone that is selling milk and get kind of a tip as to where you can find a mini Jersey or mid-sized Jersey. Let's see, Craigslist. Sometimes you get lucky. I just had a friend this morning post a mid-size that I've been sharing on my page. So if you can find a mid-size, you can breed her down even smaller to a mini. You can contact the breeders through the PMJS member directory. You just go to that membership tab and it drops down, and then start putting the word out that you're looking. But you need to be aware that it is about $3,000 to $10,000, depending on genetics, bloodlines, who the breeder is, whether they're trained, how old they are, if they've calved, if they're in milk, if they're carrying the A2 protein, if they're polled or dehorned or double polled. There's a lot of information that makes an impact on what the price ends up being. Does anybody have any questions about where to find or any tips for where they got their cow?
If you're looking to sell eventually, these are also good places to. Okay.
Absolutely. We'll get into that. I've got a slide for it in a little bit. But yeah, it's absolutely where you find your cow is where you can potentially sell her offspring or sell her if you decide to retain offspring. So, and then
I don't know how many like grass-fed big dairies there are around the country, but we have one not too far from us that every, they have a certain window that they calve every year, and after they've met their quota on replacements, they have heifers for sale that they'll be mid-sized, but you can breed down, and that's a pretty economical way to get into it if
Mm.
there are other dairies like that around the country, I'm sure.
I'm sure there are. I know we've got one south of us here in Idaho. There are not very many though that are grass based, if that's important to you. And it does take, in my experience, it takes about 4 generations to breed grain out if that's something that you want to do.
Yeah, I was thinking of the grass ones because they'll already be kind of at that lower production like a homesteader is looking for, I think. Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Avoiding that 7-gallon a day cow. All right. What do you ask the seller? What kinds of questions should you be asking before you invest in the cow? You're going to want to know if she's been exposed to other types of animals that you have on your homestead or that you might have on your homestead. If you're going to have LGDs in your field, livestock guardian dogs, it's really important, that you know that she can be trusted with dogs. Some cows don't like dogs. I've had cows born on my property, raised with the dogs that are just super mean to them. And that gets expensive if they hurt your dog. So you want to make sure that you're asking if you've got chickens that are free ranging, if she's ever been around chickens, if you've got kids, if she's ever been around kids, or if she can be exposed to them before coming to your property, just to make life a little bit easier. Ask about her training, if she has an experience being hand milked or machine milked, if she's got a preference. Find out about vaccinations if that's important to you, and also so that you know what follow-up vaccinations she might need. If you don't want GMOs, genetic modified organisms, a lot of feeds now, especially alfalfa, they are modified. Roundup ready alfalfa is modified. So if that's important to you, you're going to want to ask how much grain they feed her and what their feeding protocols are. You don't want to change it up too much, and you want to kind of know what she was raised with so that you know what to expect from her. Ask if she was raised by her dam or if she was bottle fed. You're going to find that animals that are bottle fed are going to be, I don't know, I feel like our bottle fed calves, that the few times that we've done that, they're kind of annoying because they're so friendly. They're right there in your pocket. You want to know possibly if was fed milk or if she was fed formula. Formula is just not going to be as good as the dam's milk. The breeder, if it's someone who's breeding consistently, should know what their bloodlines are going to do and how tall that animal is going to end up. They could make a guess. Never hold them to that. They can make an educated guess, but really sometimes genetics, they can just kind of do their own thing, and it could turn out to be taller than expected. So I don't ever promise anyone a mini, but I try to price fair if I'm not sure what that bloodline is going to do. You want to know if she's ever had a halter on, if she's been trained. Typically I get my calves in a halter no less than a month old, or no more than, a month old, usually a little less than a month old. And then I start them on lead training right away, because once they're small, it's easier. And as they get bigger, it's a much harder experience to try to convince them to follow you with the lead. If she's going to be calving soon, you might want to know if she's ever been in a chute before, if she's been AI'd and it took, or if they've AI'd multiple times and it didn't take. Anything there that you guys have questions about? Nope. Okay. Testing. I talk about this one a lot. I didn't test my first 2 cows when I bought them because I didn't know. That's one of those things that you kind of have to know to be able to ask. So the tests that you are required to do would be something like TB, if you're moving over a state line, the health certificate, but that even now depends on the state. So you're going to want to contact your vet, and then the state that the cow is going to or coming from, you're going to contact that vet as well. So the 2 state vets, those departments will work together and be able to figure out what testing is required. Some states are considered TB and brucellosis free, and they're not requiring the testing anymore. If you're going to ever import into California, then they do require that the calf has had a Bangs test, which is the brucellosis, actually not the test, the vaccine. So she has to have had the vaccine tag on her ear and a tattoo that says that she's been vaccinated for that. I think California is the only state that requires that. That has to be done before they turn a year old for that, and it's only for heifers. Let's see what else? A health certificate if you're moving over state lines. And then there's so many diseases out there that are just rampant. I think the last number I heard was 80% of dairy herds have disease, one kind or another, usually multiples. So I would test, and I do test now that I learned. I was very lucky that the second vet that we had really educated me on what was necessary for testing. And then of course I've done tons of research. There is a group on Facebook called Disease-Free Dairy Cows, and you can go there to learn about the different types of testing, and then the different kinds of diseases. And there's research there. And as soon as something new comes up, I'll post it there again. So it's always the freshest information. So BVD, you think diarrhea is not deadly, right? But what it does is it makes them infertile and they aren't able to breed again. Excuse me one moment. Okay, I'll edit that out. My dogs decided it was time to play. Okay. Where was I? Oh, okay. So BVD sounds like it shouldn't be dangerous because it's just diarrhea, right? Everybody gets a little upset stomach now and then, but it's actually a virus that attacks them and will make it so that they become infertile. And they can lose so much condition from being dehydrated that it can kill them. But usually what happens is that they don't breed back again. And then they will pass it if they're pregnant while they're actively infected. Bovine leukosis virus, that one's a little sneakier, not quite as bad as Johne's, but leukosis is actually a form of cancer and it is contagious, which I didn't know before I had cattle that there was such a thing. And they say if you cook the meat that it's fine, it's not dangerous for humans, but it is something that can transmit and can make us not feel good. Johne's is one that is super sneaky because it infects them typically within the first month of their life. And then it lays dormant in their intestine until they're somewhere between 5 and 7 years old. Typically they'll show signs before that. And what happens is when they calve or they move or there's a stressful weather event, anything like that that drops their immune system response, gives it a chance to take hold, and it will multiply and overtake them essentially. And it just wears them down to where they are not, they're not able to get the nutrients because they go through them so fast that they starve to death. And you can tell Johne's cow because they're just diarrhea is shooting out and they're dropping weight. And no matter what you do, you can't seem to get any weight to come back on. So that's the first thing to test for in that situation. If the dam has been tested and doesn't have Johne's, then it's fairly safe that your calf is clean. So if you are buying a calf, you don't want to test the calf because it's going to still have the active antibodies. So I would say if it's under a year old even, then the test isn't going to be quite as accurate. Definitely under 6 months old, it's not going to be as accurate. So in that situation, if you can, test the dam for these diseases. If the dam is clean, then you're fairly safe in the calf being clean. Other things to consider would be staph A, which we know is MRSA, which doesn't respond well to antibiotics. Mycoplasma, Neospora, and Q fever, they all have the ability to infect humans, which is why you want to test for it. But you need milk to be able to test for like the staph A. Actually, I think Mycoplasma and Neospora as well, you need milk sample. Q fever, I believe they can also do that with a blood sample. So are there any questions about the testing?
It's funny, I actually just have my form here that I'm filling out to send in my milk sample. So everything you're saying I had checked off, but I have a question. Are these diseases complications that happen in big dairy locations where there's a lot of cows together, or can this still happen in a small area with just a couple? I mean, in my case, I just have 2, and I do have other farm animals. I have goats, I have chickens, I have pigs, and
ones that are zoonotic could potentially infect the other animals or could infect your cows. So you found your cow, but you need to get her home. you don't want to send a cow like in the massive heat of summer because it's going to get really hot in that metal box. So try to avoid that if you can. There is some air movement and that helps, but if it's a long trip, you don't know how long they may have to sit overnight in that box. What else? Like during wintertime, you don't want to ship an animal from down south up north because they won't have had the coat put on yet. And roads could be really bad. I try not to ship it all because we're in North Idaho. I try not to ship it all after, like, say, end of October because weather gets pretty iffy and scary. If you can't do the transport yourself, which I always feel is ideal because no one's going to take care of your baby like you, right? But there are professionals out there that you can hire for a fee. They usually charge a couple dollars, that's about $3 or so a mile. Diesel's gotten really expensive. So it's very expensive for them to travel across the country, of course. There are a couple of Facebook groups that can help you. Ask for referrals for sure, ask for references. You want to know that they have insurance. So if something were to happen, if the trailer were to become disconnected, they get hit, if they get an accident, are you going to be able to recoup the cost of your animal? Make sure that they've got the proper licensing to be able to be commercial drivers. If you hire someone who's, a friend who happens to be going to that state, then there are a lot more risks involved. So just be aware of that. Try to find out about their biosecurity measures that they're going to take. If you paid extra for a cow that comes from a clean herd or closed herd that's done testing, not just closed, but closed herd that's been tested, you want to make sure that that's protected and that you're going to get your animal that you paid for in that same condition that she left that farm. So you don't want her to be in with other animals. You don't want her to have any nose-to-nose contact with other animals. Sharing water, if the feces were to roll in and she were to taste it because she's young, babies do that, then she could become infected potentially. The likelihood is small, but it's still potential, and you paid for a clean animal, you should get a clean animal. So ask them about that. You want to know if they're going to be offloading at any point in that trip. I've had cattle shipped all the way across the country, both directions. And one time they did offload and assured me that it was a clean, fresh, like they had moved the round panel, round area to like a fresh bit of grass that hadn't been used. So, you do the best you can, but you best ask what they're going to be doing so that you know what you're paying for. Let's see what else. If you're going to be doing the hauling, a 2-horse trailer, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Horses are tied for shipping, cows are not. Cows will lay down during transport. So you just leave them. You can put a halter on them. If I'm shipping really far, I like to also put a dog tag with a contact phone number. If for some reason, they did get hit and the door came open and the cow got away from them, I like to know that somebody might be able to get a hold of them and get them back to me. That's part of my parent. Trailers don't have the same kind of shocks as a car. So to give them the best, most comfortable ride, you want to have a good amount of bedding, like a good 4 to 6 inches of straw underneath them. Wood shavings will work. They blow around a bit more though. Have a little trailer around, like if you need to take them to the vet, or I've even used it to move furniture. Exactly. And to haul hay, it's just nice to have a truck. All right.
Yeah.
What are her basic needs for housing? So Jerseys are really, really adaptable. They do well up here when we have our -5-degree temperatures. And they did great in Kansas when we hit 113 before we moved here to Idaho. So they just do really well. And they're all across the world. They live in all kinds of different conditions. It is important that you have some sort of a shelter for her to get into away from the sun because they can get sunburned. Wind, rain, snow, any of that kind of extreme weather. They'll be out there grazing in the rain. Usually they don't mind it at all. But if you do start getting some real wind and rain, then it gets pretty miserable. So a nice heavy stand of trees, if you live in a very mild climate, should be okay. If you have any sort of weather extremes, then a 3-sided shelter, a run-in shelter, a loafing barn, any of those kinds of things, it's going to be very helpful to keep her in good condition and not stress her immune system too much. You want to keep her udder dry and clean. That's really important for mastitis. Because when they lay down, their feet come up and bump their teats and their udder, and that's where that manure gets on the teats. So by keeping their bedding areas clean, then their feet aren't as dirty, and when they lay down, they don't get as dirty. So you need some sort of bedding material, just like in the trailer, and that can be almost anything. we'll take from the trough, the old stemmy hay that the cows didn't eat and use that in bedding areas. And then you just scoop it into your compost and it breaks down. But compost does breed flies. So you want to make sure that all that soil bedding is getting removed away from the cows, somewhere where it can compost and break down. Then you can put it out on your pasture in the fall and let it go through the winter and feed your pastures. You want your fences to be high enough to keep her in and to keep your neighbor's bulls out, especially if you've got a mini. She's really small. So those neighbor bulls could be, they could be full-size Angus bulls. And not only would it not be safe for her to calve that calf, it wouldn't be safe for him to get on her, to hurt her really badly, to the point where she's paralyzed. So you want to keep him where he belongs and keep her in where she belongs. Electric is really helpful for that. There are some solar chargers if you live in an area that gets a lot of sun and not a lot of snow. High north like this, we don't have great luck with solar. The fence shown here in the picture is my fence. It is 5'8". It's electrified high tensile. We had used barbed wire in the past, and I found that it was leaving marks on my cows, and I didn't like it. So we switched out to this slick wire, and we were able to electrify it, which we couldn't do with the barbed wire. So I'm really happy with the results from this kind of fencing. It's really tall, so nobody can get over it. The gaps of the fence when you fence, whether it is barbed wire or high tensile, you want to start smaller gaps at the bottom where the grass is, because they will, especially calves and minis, they're so small. They'll put their head through to eat what's on the other side of the fence. And then as their grazing behavior is, they'll take a step forward and they'll step right over that wire. If they can push through it, they'll just go right through it, just grazing, and not even really slow down. So if you can keep those gaps at the bottom closer together, and then you can widen it up so you don't have to spend as much line, to be able to expensive it. That'll keep them in. You can run with barbed wire. You can run a separate line of hot wire. If you're going to do that, you want to put one right at about rump height so they can't back up or sidle up and get nursed through the fence, or back up and get bred through the fence. I have heard of that happening. And putting a hot wire at the top of the fence will keep them from going over usually. Let's see, every pen needs to have access to water, whether that's a large bucket that you're filling on a regular basis. You want to make sure you're keeping it clean and full. Even in the winter, they need a lot of water. Your hay should be available all the time. The only time that I think maybe you can get away with not having hay available is when they've been on pasture for a couple of weeks and their rumen has adjusted to it, and they're not having any sort of runs or anything from really fresh grass. But other than that, they really should have access to hay all the time. That should be the foundation for their diet. And cows will stand up and then go poop, no matter where they are. So if they decide to spread the feed out and lay on it, that's what they're going to do, and they're going to soil your feed. So you may want to use a trough or a hay ring. Let's see. So a great question I think all of us have had lots of times is, how much pasture do I need for a mini? I've had people approach me and say they've been told they can keep a mini in their backyard, and their backyard is a half an acre. But honestly, what's going to happen is she's going to graze that down, and it's not going to have a time to recover once she's grazed it. So then she'll go back through and regraze it, and it just will never recover. And eventually the grass will starve and die. And then you end up with a backyard full of cow poop and no grass. So it's best they have at least a couple of acres. I like to see at least 3 acres of pasture. The reason that I say that is because she's going to have a calf every single year. So she's fresh and in milk again every single year. So then you've got 2 animals on your pasture. And what if she were to have a bull calf and you decide to steer it and raise it out and then butcher it? He has to be 2 years old, give or take a couple months, before he's butcher size. So then she's calved again another year later, and then you've got 3 animals in your pasture. So it's best to have a little bit more pasture than you have cows. And if you don't have more, then you're going to want to strongly consider selling your calf as soon as it's weaned. So have a fire lined up beforehand so that as soon as it's weaned, it can go before it's really getting into your grass and competing with her. Your extension office is going to be your best source for find out what the stocking rate is for your county. And sometimes there are laws about how many animals you can have on your property in that county. So they'll be able to help you with that as well. Are there any questions or anything that I've missed here?
we learned the hard way about the hay and the feeding of the grass. So we were very new to this. My husband thought that, cattle only gets hay in the winter time, but she had plenty of grass to eat. She did great in the winter time. We gave her the hay. Spring came along and I hadn't done my research, and we learned it was very scary. We got a big scare with her about spring grass. I had no idea it was a thing and that I had to keep her contained her in an area that didn't have grass.
Right.
And we were giving a lot of hay, but that was something that we had to learn. We almost lost.
Do not let her have access to the grass in the morning when the dew is still on the grass. So once the dew burns off, in the afternoon, give her like a half an hour and then build up to about an hour, so like 2 days with a half an hour, and then a couple of days with an hour, and then a couple of days with 2 hours, and then a couple of days of 3 hours, until she works her way up to where she's at about 6 to 8 hours a day. And then you can probably let her have access all of the time to the grass. But you want to make sure that the rumen is adjusting slowly and that she's got access to hay first. So if you feed her hay before she goes on the grass, then I'll also limit how much grass she's getting, and it'll have that dry matter in there at the same time, so she doesn't end up getting grass tetany. And grass tetany is scary and it can kill them. And I've done it myself. I've had it happen in the middle of summer when I wasn't even thinking about it. They've been on grass for ages, and then we got a couple days of rain, didn't think it through. They had access to the grass, and one of them comes in staggering that night to get milked. And then it's a whole thing, and it's hours and days of watching and trying to save their life, essentially. Okay, preventative care. What kind of care does she need? So cows don't have to have their teeth loaded like horses do. They should have their hooves trimmed on a regular basis. I know some people have told me that they don't do that because they have really rocky soil, but what happens is their toes may wear toes. Cows have 2 toes, right? They may wear unevenly, and one may get a little longer, or she may get a sore spot on her foot and then kind of get a limp to where she's not wearing them the same. So having someone check them on a regular basis, about once every year to 18 months, can be really helpful. If you notice anything going off with her feet, if she's walking funny, she could have a rock stuck between her toes, or something called hairy warts, which is a wart that grows in between the toes right up at the skin. White line disease is underneath the hoof, and it's not something you can see unless you pick their feet up. And again, cows aren't horses, and most of them will not let you just pick their feet up. So having someone, like you can see here, this is Ruby, and she's flipped on her side so that the hoof trimmer can get at her feet, and she's secure in there. There's a belly band holding her in place, and her feet are locked into place. So she's safe, but I still stand there. You can see my little rubber glove protecting her eye, because that hoof, when they're trimming it, goes flying everywhere, and I don't want it to get into her eye. So I try to protect them as much as I can so they don't have to deal with that. They're a little pampered. Let's see. Cows don't need a bath, but you do want to make sure that you're keeping them so that they're not caked in any sort of manure, or after the calve, there's usually a mess. If you let it dry, you should be able to just brush it right off. Let's see, if they get some, like in the spring when things are really wet and muddy, you may have to hose them off a bit. Of course, when you're milking, you're going to want to keep the udder really clean. Some of you may decide that you want to do vaccinations, and so talk to your vet about that and figure out what kind of a schedule and what kind of things are of concern in your area. Blackleg it's in different areas, and sometimes there'll be an outbreak, and your vet will be the one to know about that kind of thing. If they have horns, my first 2 cows did, I was able to get them trimmed. So there's I believe it's an artery that is in the horn, and when they trim, they want to be able to cauterize that if they get too low. So I had it done by a veterinarian at a vet college, so that they were prepared with the iron to do that, and it kept them trimmed about 4 inches shorter or so than they would have been normally, and they were blunt. So it wasn't as sharp as likely that she's going to injure someone else with her horn, because it was a nub basically. And one of the other things that the hoof trimmer might offer you is to have her udder singed. It's not something I've done, but I know that the dairies do it, and my hoof trimmer has offered to do that. But I found that just a little pair of scissors and just kind of trimming up around the teats of a trained cow is not a problem at all. Of course, I don't want to do that with a heifer that's not used to being milked or anything until maybe 4 months or so into the lactation, when they're standing really well and they're calm. Then you can get scissors up there that aren't blunt and not worry too much about it. Any other regular care that you guys do that I didn't list here, or any questions about any of this?
No. No.
I don't know if it's care exactly, but I think of it as preventative, making sure that they always have minerals.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Yep, we're gonna get that, maybe even
Oh,
in the
another one
next
for that,
slide.
okay.
Yeah, feeding your cow.
There we go.
Perfect segue,
Oh.
Sarah. Thanks. So we talked before about how your cow should always have access to fresh water and good hay.
Mhm.
Good hay doesn't necessarily have to be horse quality hay, but it shouldn't be the weedy edges of the field, and it should be a smelling sweet, not old. Sometimes they'll say cow hay, and it's like chopped up, or it's been dried too long before it was baled, and there's just not much nutrition in that. So I do want to specify that it's good quality hay, because these are athletes essentially when they're in milk and pregnant at the same time. It's a lot going on for their dietary needs. Supplementation, some cows are going to require some grain to help them hold their condition or to produce milk. Grain and alfalfa are going to make more milk if you use BOSS, which is black oil sunflower seeds. So not just any old sunflower seeds, but specifically the black oil that you can find as bird feed. That can be used to add fat to her milk, which means more butter, more cream. It can also help her to hold her condition, and you'll notice that her coat will get nice and shiny, and it's a healthy fat for them because it's a plant fat and not an animal fat. There may be other things that you want to use. Some people use beet pulp to be able to add condition on. If you have a cow that's really, really hard to keep condition, and I've had a few of those, we've used rice bran. So it's a stabilized rice bran. It doesn't break down. It doesn't go rancid as quickly as if it weren't stabilized. There's a brand of senior equine horse feed called Maxi Glow. I was told by the company is not, I think it's Purina. It is not GMO. Reconfirm that. It's been a couple of years since I've called. But that was really good. It's basically like feeding her cake, like if I eat a piece of chocolate cake every day, I'm going to definitely hold my condition, right? So that's kind of what that does for her, is it's going to help her hold her body condition. If she's like at peak and losing and you can't get it on and she's disease free, then something like the beet pulp or the stabilized rice bran is going to be really helpful. For stabilized rice bran, you're just like a quarter to a half a cup or so a day. Build up to where she can get as much as a cup at each milking, so twice a day, and then slowly go back down with that one. Loose minerals are super important, and that's one of those things I didn't know at the beginning. I got lucky with my calves, but now the calves, like when they're born, they are up within a half an hour. By an hour old, they're trying to latch on, they're running around, like literally running around. So minerals are so important, not just for your cow, but for the next generation. You may find, and I think we get into that in one of the other slides, so I don't get too much into it, but salt adds to edema. So be aware that loose minerals contain salt. And some areas are going to be deficient in selenium. So your extension office, again, can tell you if that's an area that you live in, that you need to add selenium. It's white muscle disease I believe that's what they call it in humans, selenium deficiency. You can give your cow a vaccination that has like a shot that has selenium in it, I believe. I know there is, I can't think of the name of it. There's, can you guys remember the name of the mineral shot?
Multimin? Is that what you're thinking of?
Multimin, thank you. So obvious. Okay, Multimin contains selenium and is something that you can safely give when she's pregnant. Ideally, give it before you breed. That will help her to conceive, and then about 2 weeks before she calves, so that the calf is also getting that extra selenium right before birth. Those are the ideal times to use it. Cows cannot lick enough of a salt block to be able to get all of their minerals. Can you imagine if you could only get your minerals by licking you're just not going to get what you need, right? And they're even bigger than we are. So a loose mineral specifically, something that is in kind of a salt granular form, will help them to be able to get as much as they need. I personally use Thorvin kelp and Redmond's 90 with the selenium. And then I also like to add a little bit of Redmond's conditioner. For myself, I found that my herd where they weren't dropping their placenta as quickly after calving. So I added the conditioner, Redmond's conditioner, back in, and it went back down to 3.5 hours after calving. So that's what's working for me in my area. You kind of need to test it for yourselves, but a good mineral is really important. Any questions about this one?
Yes, so I have a lot of questions. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. Go ahead.
Okay, so we've been trying to AI her for some time already. We've had, I think, 3 or 4 unsuccessful AIs, but
Mhm.
the last one we thought she took, although we think on Saturday we're gonna test her for pregnancy. So when I would feed her while milking, I always gave her alfalfa and Boss. But since I read when they get pregnant, you want to drop the alfalfa and you don't want to give too much of the oil sunflower seeds because she might gain too much weight too fast. So just do the grain by itself if she's pregnant. Um, is that how, and then just a little bit before she calves, you stop?
So I would say if she's in milk, that you're not going to have trouble with her getting too heavy. As long
Okay.
as she's in milk, she's probably going to need those extra calories, especially
Mhm.
while pregnant.
Okay.
So I don't pull any of those. Laura, Sarah, do either of you stop those while in
I
milk?
don't stop for them. We have one of our cows who she always like as she tapers off her production, she loses interest in the alfalfa.
Hmm.
But other than that, I continue it the whole time that we're milking them.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Right before drying your cow off, about 2 months before she calves, then that's when you're going to start pulling back on the feed because you want that milk production to slowly taper off. So not
Okay.
having the calories to produce milk will make it
Okay.
naturally taper off. And that's when I would take them off of those things. And then the last month of their pregnancy before they calve, all they're on is hay and water. And
Mhm.
Got
that's the month that I would worry about overfeeding because she's not in milk anymore and she's getting closer to calving.
Okay.
I do
Yeah.
something similar to what you do, Lorna, with bringing it out and taking away, but I use old roasting pans so that a few of them can stick their heads in at a time, and I don't mix them. I give them one kelp,
Mhm.
one Redmond salt, and then we actually get the selenium on separate on its own.
Okay.
Because I found that they want even more than the salt has. I think we're like significantly deficient here. And then I have not, I have the mineral buffet as well that has
Yep.
the, I think I want to say like 15 or 16 if you count selenium. But I've never found a good way to have that out where they don't just, mess it up and waste it all. So we have in our 2 of our shelters, we have individual cubbies on the walls. So if I feel like they need something different, I'll bring them there, or the last like month before calving, they'll be up there so that I know they're balancing their minerals before calving.
Just be careful with salt, especially with a heifer, because they can get
I
a
don't
lot of
think
the
any
demon
of
in their udder.
actually, yeah, there is pure salt in there. You're right. But and I think with our most recent round of calving, because you had told me that, I took the salt away and I didn't notice much difference, but we haven't had too bad of an issue with the edema.
Tends to be the really high producing cows, like the cows that are going to be your 4 to 6 gallon
Mm.
minis, that those are the ones that are going to have more trouble with edema because their udder is growing so quickly that last couple of weeks that they get a lot of fluid retention to where they'll even get it in their thighs and in their belly button sometimes. So that's when I started learning like, oh, okay, I need to pull the salt. Just like with us at our last month of pregnancy, right? Your ankles swell up because that's the lowest part. So the fluid will stay there and you have to stay away from potato chips for sure. Okay, breeding your cow. How do you get your cow bred? Because you're going to want to have her bred about every year. You can go and look for bulls in the group Mini Jersey Bulls and AI Straws on Facebook. That's one that I started a long time ago. People will post their bowls there for sale. They'll post their straws there. You can trade bowls with people, so you can just get a different bloodline if that's what you want to do. Let's see. So the way that it works right now is that mini Jersey breeders that collect their bowl will sell their straws through their website, and you'll pay each individual one. There are multiple collection facilities across the United States where the straws are stored in liquid nitrogen. So when they ship, they have to ship in liquid nitrogen, and that costs you about $100 to $200 to rent the tank, have the tank charged with liquid nitrogen, and then to ship it. So it's not just the tank that you're paying for, it's the use of the tank and all that goes with that. So the straws they could be, if you purchase more than one bowl, they could be at 2 different shipping facilities, that storage facilities. Then each one of those is going to charge you a shipping fee. So we're trying to consolidate the mini Jersey bowls for PMJS at the Hoffman AI breeders in Utah, so that we can order multiple bowls all from the same shipping and not have to pay multiple $200 shipping fees. So that's really handy. That's where my straws are. There's also a list of AI techs that can use those straws to get your cow bred. If you go to PMJS, it's a drop down in the resources tab, I believe. You can go to Purebred Mini Jersey Society again, to the Facebook group, and you can ask for who's got straws, what straws are available, what people like for their bowls. The nice thing about that Mini Jersey bowls and AI straws is you can look a bowl up by name and see what his offspring look like and kind of get an idea. A lot of times Mini Jersey bowls don't have the full genomic testing that PMJS does. So being able to see the offspring can at least give you an idea. I've gone on there before myself and posted, like, did this bull produce minis? Would you use this bull on a heifer? Did this bull downsize? So those kinds of questions you can look and see if anybody else has already asked. Let's see. I've been in the position before that I couldn't get anyone out to come and AI right when we started, and we were living in Kansas. Nobody would come out and AI for me because I only had 1 cow or maybe 2 cows. So they didn't want to do it, but I was able to find a bull, wait for him to grow up. My cow nursed him until he was about 11 months old, and he was finally big enough to be able to breed her. It's a very slow process to do that. Usually you can find a mature bull now through the Mini Jersey Bulls Facebook group that is ready and old enough to breed. They only need to be about 10 months old. Be aware though that a bull calf can be fertile as early as 4 months. So you don't want him around any of your little young heifers. You can't breed them together, or they will. If you bring them together, they will breed. Let's see. If your AI tech is busy, if he doesn't want to drive because you live way out in the country, if it's hard to see when your cow is coming into heat, you can use what's called a cedar protocol. So that's a cedar in that picture right there. That little white part with the plastic string goes inside the bottom of the blue applicator. The applicator goes inside the vulva, excuse me. Inside, yes, and then and then that is left hanging out, and you'll leave it in there for sometimes 10 days and then pull it back out. And then it triggers, because of the hormones, it'll trigger her to come into heat. So they can time it down to the hour for when they need to breed, and that way you can be more likely to have a successful breeding and be able to get your tech to come out, because I know that that's sometimes an issue too. I think we covered everything on this slide. Was there any questions?
So about this one, to the hour, sorry, I'm writing it down. So since I'm going through it with my cow, the last 3 times we didn't use the cedar. This last one we did. And I'm using the sexed semen, the straws. I come out talking to Becky about it. She tells me, you know, there's not enough. The straws are much little, are smaller than the regular straws. There's not enough semen in there. Maybe. So here's where my question is, on my next time that we do this with the cedar again, can we do 2 straws of sex semen? Do you think it will help make a difference?
Breeding her on a natural heat. It's her body is already in the cycle. You're not forcing the cycle with something like a cedar. So that should have a higher fertility. The good thing about a cedar though, is that you aren't guessing when she's coming into heat. You know when she's coming into heat based on the protocol, based on the timing of when that comes out, when the hormone shots are given, so they can breed her exactly on when she should be bred for when that cycle is happening.
Right.
Where with the natural heat, you may not see that she came into heat at 5 o'clock in the morning because you didn't go out until 7 o'clock in the morning. And that can make a difference with some cows. So the science is really good, but we're still working with animals. So there's still a lot of variation and it doesn't always happen. If it's super hot outside, she may not settle. If it's super cold outside, she may not settle. So time one slightly early and then time one slightly late.
Mm.
And that will give you a longer window of coverage for when there is semen in there that's viable, because semen doesn't live forever, right? That's why we're trying to get that window of time perfect for when we put it in. I can't remember from our AI class exactly how long it lasts. I want to say that it's like 12 hours or something. So that if you put it in a little early and then do a second straw a little late, it broadens your window of time that the coverage is in there and viable, to be able to get the semen to get where they need to go.
That was what you just told me, because we were thinking on doing that last time, but we were just so unsure. We didn't know, but this is awesome because I will do it this way this time around.
And hopefully you don't get a heat wave, right?
Oh yes, we're gonna try next time, and I'm gonna keep the heat wave in mind. But her calf, she just started to get her heats, and she is like, I could tell right away that she's in heat.
Super obvious and nice and easy for you.
Yeah,
This is
super.
Ruby having her little calf burn.
Mhm. Oh,
And you'll see the bag of waters come out afterwards right here. So she'll have another contraction and then she delivers that.
oh.
There you go. So, so how do you prepare for her calving? Hoping that Andrea's cow is bred. Jerseys are known for having a really great calving ability. They don't usually need any sort of assistance. And that goes for mini jerseys too. They are really great at calving. They just have such small calves. You can see how tiny that little head is and how it's pointed and it just comes right out. What you're going to look for, and I chant it in the barn every time that they're in labor, you're looking for 2 toes and a nose, so that the 2 toes will be one usually right next to or on top of each other. And those will be the first thing you see. And then you'll see the nose start to come out on top of the legs. We talked about taking the salt away because of edema. You want to make sure you're packing a calving kit and to keep that near about a week to 2 weeks before they calve, because they can go early and they can go late. And that's still within a normal range. It's considered normal. Let's see. The videos below that watch the calving playlist. It's a list of videos for what it would look like if they don't have the toes and nose like they're supposed to. Say the toes aren't pointing the right direction, or you see the toes, but you never progresses and you never see the nose starting to come out and things start to stop. Then you'll want to go in and find out if the head is bent to the side so that they're not lined up anymore. You could get back feet presenting instead of front feet. So that calving playlist tells you what it looks like, and they actually show you with a pelvic bone and with a calf coming through how it's supposed to look. So it's like just the pelvic bone, and then I want to say it's a cadaver calf or something. I can't remember. I haven't watched it in a while. I'm going to, because I like to rewatch it every year before I start calving. But it shows you what it looks like and then how to appropriately respond. Because normally, if you're going to do any sort of assistance, you're going to grab that calf, not the feet, but above the feet on the legs. You don't want to dislocate the feet. So you're just going to hold and not put any real pulling pressure. If it gets to that, then you're going to need to reach in and make sure the nose is where it needs to be. And they show you how to look for that. And then if it's bent back, or if there's a leg bent back, you can reach in and you can get it lined up the way it's supposed to be. And then you pull down. So instead of pulling up and out, you pull down towards her back feet. And it's just a slow, gentle pressure working with her body. You don't want to be the one doing the work. You're just keeping the calf from sliding back in, essentially. Um, if there's a serious situation and you need help, then you need to get help quickly. So don't delay in calling your vet. That should be in your calving kit. It should be on a piece of paper written out. This is the vet's name. This is the vet's phone number. Because if you're in the barn, you don't want to leave to go call the vet. You want to be there for your cow. If anything changes, you need to be able to react to it. So on a piece of paper means you can pass it to your spouse or to one of the kids to go make that phone call and say, hey, we need help right now. Let's see what else here. Yep. So it's written down. And then, oh, so if you have a cow that's stressing because she's in labor, especially a heifer, and she hasn't done this before, she doesn't know what's going on, she can get really agitated and anxious. And I found that brushing them, if that's a regular behavior, you know, between their herd mates, they'll lick each other. And that's kind of that same kind of thing. So if brushing her and talking to her can help her to relax, that'll start bringing those contractions on stronger, and it actually getting things start to move it up again. If she's one of those cows that would rather be completely alone for calving, you need to watch for those cues. She won't want to be near you. She'll keep trying to be the farthest place in the stall or in the pasture that she can get as far away from you as possible. I have one like that. She prefers to be on her own. She doesn't want any sort of interference or comfort. She just wants me to stay away from her. So I have to kind of peek at her or watch through a camera. But I have other ones that if I try to leave the stall while they're in labor, they get even more distressed. Like they want me there to comfort them and to just to be there. I had one that she labored pretty much the whole time with her head just resting on my stomach. She just wanted to just stand there and be near me. And that's because of that bond in that relationship. So if that is comforting to them, then that's great. I can offer that. After they calve, their minerals are going to drop because of all of the stress and everything, and their immune system is going to drop. So giving them some molasses water after calving, not only does it have sugar in it, which is going to help give them energy, but it also has things like iron and trace minerals in it that's really good for them to help them recover from the calving process. We saw here how the bag of waters comes out afterwards. That's totally normal. And it can be anywhere from 2 to about 6 hours after calving, the placenta comes loose. You never want to pull on the placenta, let it do its own thing. And then it's up to you whether or not you let her eat that or you take it away. Do be aware if you throw it out in your compost pile that it could attract rodents and insects and coyotes and things like that. So you may want to burn it or bury it. If it goes past that 6 hours, like she calved, and the next day you don't see any placenta, there, you're concerned that it didn't come out, then you're going to need to get a hold of your vet because the cervix will close down and the placenta can be retained, and that can cause infection, uterine infections. So before it gets to that point, have your vet out. Usually that's a sign that the calcium is low. So giving her some calcium at that point from your vet could be very helpful from keeping her also going into milk fever. So retained placenta is a sign that you could be dealing with milk fever later on in this lactation when she starts coming into milk at about 10 days or so, 5 to 10 days. And then certainly when she's coming into peak, you could have problems at that point as well, which would be around 2 to 3 months. So calving is natural. Don't stress too much. They usually know what they're doing and it's not going to be a problem. Usually they're going to love their calf and they're going to lick it and they're going to get it all dry and they're going to be willing to stand for the calf to nurse, but not always. So we'll get into that in the next slide. But do you have any questions about calving?
So even if she passes the placenta, do you recommend we give a little bit of calcium just to prevent the milk fever? Or-
If she passes the calcium normally, I don't normally worry too much about it because I know my mineral program is solid and that she was getting minerals all through her pregnancy and before conception. And then I'll start giving her minerals again after she calves. I pull them the last month of her pregnancy because of edema, but then I'll give them back to her at calving and then slowly start working alfalfa back into her diet. So maybe like a couple of handfuls to help with that because alfalfa has some calcium in it naturally. So a couple handfuls after calving, plus the molasses water is usually all that they need, and hay and water. But yeah, it's not normally an issue. If you are really concerned, you can get tubes of what's called CMPK, which has calcium, potassium, magnesium, and something else, K, that I can't remember. And you can give them, you don't have to give them the whole tube. Like you could give her a half of a tube before her due date or while she's in labor, and then give her the other half a couple of days after labor. If you want to make sure that you've got her all topped off, but if you're giving her good minerals, it shouldn't be a problem.
Perfect.
Milking. This is a picture of Sarah, I think. Is that right,
Mhm,
Sarah?
mhm. That's me and Mulberry, I think.
So to milk your cow, there's milk machines that cost $1,000, $2,000. There's all kinds of things that you could do to, things you can buy to make milking easier. But honestly, like she's milking into a jar, and I did that for 7 years. It's completely acceptable as long as you're getting clean milk into your fridge for your family. That's disease free and from a healthy cow. That's all that matters. So everything else is just kind of a bonus. You can expect about 2 to 5 gallons of milk a day from a mini Jersey. That's always a question that we get. A mid-size is likely to give you a little bit more. Bloodline does have something to do with it. It's something that's inherited from their dam and from their sire. Let's see. A heifer will give a little bit less milk her first year of being in milk, but then after that, year 2 and 3, she's going to make more milk. Sometimes even year 4, and then it'll taper off through the next lactations and slowly taper off for the rest of her life. It's important that you milk a heifer because that sets her up for her production for the rest of her life. So even if you're only going to be milking her once a day to kind of take what the calf doesn't take, it's still important that she's milked during that lactation because it does affect her production potential for the rest of her life. A fresh cow, I feel very strongly personally about this, that a fresh cow needs to be milked twice a day until the calf is old enough to take all of the milk. And the reason for that, again, is that it gets very uncomfortable. She gets very full. If you've ever had a baby, then you know it can be really uncomfortable. Broken blood vessels, and you can see that when you get the pink milk sometimes. With a higher producing cow, you usually get that in their first lactation. So milking them twice a day maintains their udder. It helps it from getting overstretched. So it doesn't always go back like it used to be. So milking twice a day keeps the milk moving through, reduces your chance of mastitis, and takes good care of your cow. You can calf share with your cow, and you can move to once a day milking. Sometimes you can do that earlier than other times. It really depends on the particular cow. So if you are calf sharing, you're going to let the calf get its feed usually first before you take what's left over. And that may be that you get to a point where the calf is taking all of it. So you're going to milk out 3/4 and leave 1/4 for the calf, or you're going to milk in the morning and then wait a couple hours and then turn her out with the calf, and the calf gets the rest of the day. And then you separate at nighttime. There's quite a bit of flexibility there in how much the calf is getting, when the calf is getting access. It has to do with your cow. It has to do with your time, your capability, your setup, but always making sure that the milk is moving through on a regular basis so that you don't have any bacteria building up, because the udder is a perfect location for bacteria. It's warm, it's moist. That's where bacteria grows. So keeping it moving through is just going to keep you from having to deal with mastitis, which can take weeks to get rid of, and can require extra milking sessions, and it's milk that you can't even keep. So it's best to just head it off. Whether you milk by hand or a machine is really just a personal preference. Like I said, I milked just like she's showing for 7 years. I'd fill a jar, put a cap on it, grab another jar, open the cap, fill it up, put the cap back on. And, sometimes it would be 8 to 12 jars of quarts like this that I would take into the house to filter. And it worked just fine. When I'm training a heifer, I'll use a plastic coffee can. Like what you buy Folgers or whatever, those, they're just plastic and they've got a lid. So the great thing about those plastic coffee cans, I think I heard somebody giggling because they probably heard this before, that plastic coffee can doesn't hurt as much when it bounces off your face when the heifer kicks it. So you don't end up breaking any jars. You don't end up getting your metal milker kicked anywhere. And it's just like you're training her. So it's okay to use something that's plastic. Normally though, it's going to flavor your milk. So you don't want to use something plastic. And it typically takes about a month for me to train a heifer. Laura, Sarah, have you guys had any better or worse experience when you're training a heifer? Does it take about a month on average, you think?
I think we've ranged anywhere from 2 weeks to a month. So 2 weeks being the easiest.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say I've had that before, but it's not as often as it takes a month. And it
Mhm.
feels like for some reason, maybe I set myself up for it, but I feel like the third milking session is always the worst. Like the first one, they're kind of freaked out and hormonal. And then the second one, they're like, okay, wait, we did this before. I don't know how I feel about it. And by the third one, they're like, nope, I decided I don't like it. Like, sorry, but we're gonna do it anyway. So,
Mhm.
and then it's like they kind of settle in and you get a routine and everything's fine, but it does usually take a little bit of time. And you know, she's got a cow just tied to a tree here, I think. So that
Yes, that's pretty much all we've ever done is tied to a tree or a T-post or whatever's handy where we are.
that's nice. That's nice.
That's
I've done
very
that for years too, but for training a heifer, tying to a tree, I don't want to do that anymore.
We actually, our hardest one that we had to train, we actually have a milk stanchion, but at the time it was buried in hay in the garage and we couldn't use it. So I had my husband and our 12-year-old son make a headlock for the cow while I was milking her because a rope wasn't going to work for training her.
Yeah. Yeah, heifers, they can be a rodeo. Um, I usually milk now in my squeeze chute. They just run up and then we just catch their head and I don't close the sides down on them or anything. It works fine. It lifts them up a couple inches, so that makes it a little more comfortable for my husband or my daughter to slip in there and do it. But if I had to with a heifer, I can squeeze the sides down of my squeeze chute. It's the same place we do our AI breeding. They get used to it and they get to where they don't mind it. I can just open the gate from my pasture and they will literally run to go into the squeeze chute to get milked.
oh,
To get a little bit of, you know, the black oil sunflower seeds and alfalfa pellets and but they like it. They enjoy it. They get spoiled in there, so it's a good thing. See, so yep, we touched on that every step of your process needs to be really, really clean. Your jars need to be sterile. Hot soapy water to wash the udder. And that's where I use those old coffee cans to bring the hot soapy water out to wash the udder. I use Castile soap, but really any gentle soap will do. It doesn't have to be anything specifically made for milking. You do want the water to be warm, and that can help with the letdown as well. I use whitewash cloths. I specify that because then you can see when the udder is clean because the washcloth isn't getting dirty anymore. A lot of people use teat dip. Not everybody does. You can have a mastitis test, whether it's the California mastitis test or Dr. Naylor's has a card that has 4 different corners. And when you spray milk on from each of the 4 quarters, it'll turn from yellow to green or blue if you've got a full infection going. And you don't need to do that every time you milk, but if you feel like a quarter isn't quite feeling right, or if you see something, when you're first doing your you're going to spray it into a cup or even into your hand to be able to one 3 to 6 times, three to 6 sprays to move any bacteria that may have gotten into the early part of it, like just right in that T canal. It flushes the bacteria out so you're not putting it into your milk collection, which means your milk will last longer and it's cleaner. Yep, a head catch, a rope, a chute, stanchion, anything. I don't spoil my cows as far as like I may milk them in my squeeze chute and then something comes up. Like right now, my squeeze chute's not even in my barn. It's out in front of my barn. So then I'll either lead them in or I'll tie them in a stall or I'll tie them to a tree. I don't want them getting too comfortable with one particular way or one particular side. Because when they get sold, they're not with me, then things may be different. So I want them to be comfortable with everything. Your container for putting your milk in needs to be stainless steel or glass. Those are non-porous materials, so you don't have any bacteria that builds up inside them. And even with those, you still should be using a heavier cleaning process on a regular basis. As far as the filter, I used coffee filters for years. You can use a folded over flour sack. Don't use cheesecloth because it's got little pieces of fabric, but any sort of fabric. I've heard people use old t-shirts folded over to filter their milk. And then of course you can buy a non-gauze filter made for filtering milk in a large funnel, specifically for that reason. But when you're getting started, you don't have to invest all the money in all the things to be able to do your milk. That, as long as you're getting it clean and in your fridge, that's all you really need. I think that's everything. Is there any questions about the milking process?
So how I milk Samantha, I was calf sharing for a very long time, actually. It was a little bit of a challenge to get the calf to stop. I think I stopped when she was 10 months, 9 months. And now we milk every morning. And it's been working for us. It's been doing well in the sense that I don't see that I need to milk in the evening as well. One of my requirements when I got her was I didn't want a heavy producer. So Kristen she said, I get 2.5 gallons from her. And I said, that's perfect because it's just for us. And even so, then it's a lot of milk. But I always knew that you had to milk them if you're not calf sharing twice a day. And I said, let me see if it works once a day for us. And we get 2.5 gallons from her every day.
Was that after her peak at 2 to 3 months that you started doing once a day?
No, I started to do
Right
once
from
a
the
day
beginning?
at 9 months. And when the
Okay.
calf separated the calf, because
Yeah.
when I completely, like, she has a nose ring right now to stop nursing from her. That's the only way I'm able to stop that she
So
doesn't go to her udder.
that twice a day milking that I said I feel really personal about it when they're first fresh, and
Oh,
going into their peak of lactation, that 2 to 3 months, that's when
oh,
they're going to make the most milk in that lactation. So
okay.
then after that, it slowly starts tapering off. Some animals will taper off quickly after that point, but definitely going up to that point until the calf is big enough that its appetite has grown to where it can take it all.
Yeah.
That's when I feel like you should be milking twice a day because they will get super tight and it'll
Oh,
drop your production down, which means that your lactation won't even be as long because you're not producing as much. So they'll taper off faster later into lactation. Does that make sense?
yeah.
So keeping the production up and keeping everything moving through um, at the beginning part, going into peak and then through peak. And then usually right at about that 2.5 to 3 months mark, the calf can take all of the milk anyways. And then there could be even days that you don't milk at all because the calf is taking it all. That's when you need to start watching your cow and your calf and seeing if everybody's healthy. If she's getting fully emptied, the calf is getting everything it needs. You even have to watch, like there was a time when I broke my toe and I couldn't get down to the barn during lactation. And my daughter was checking my cow for me because the calf was taking it all. But she didn't tell me that the cow had laid down in a manure pile and coated one of the teats. So the calf didn't nurse that teat because it was coated in manure. And she was particular. So that quarter didn't get emptied for 2 days before my daughter said something about it to me. And then I had to hobble myself down to the barn 4 times a day for the next couple of weeks to get that quarter cleared back out and clean up any mastitis that was going on in there because it did get infected from not being milked and from having the manure on it. So yeah.
So if you're gonna let the calf take it all, at least do an udder check.
Yeah,
Yeah.
still keep an eye on things and make sure that everybody
Mhm.
is healthy and things are moving along. And it was a fluke that I wasn't able to get to the barn and that she happened to lay in a manure pile and that heifer happened to be kind of particular because I feel like most of the time they'll just nurse right through it and they don't care.
Mhm.
Again, I wasn't able to get to the barn, so I wasn't helping keeping the bedding clean. So unfortunate. Okay, so you've got your calf, but now you need to know what the calf needs. So as you can see here, my husband is drying off our little calf. The cow will come and lick and help with that process, but if it's outside, like he's all bundled up and he's got his hat on, so it's obviously when we're calving in some colder temperatures, we're going to help that calf get dry to the point we may even bring a blow dryer out to the barn and help it get real dry and be dry before overnight when it's sleeping out in those cold temperatures. That rubbing like that vigorous rubbing also stimulates it to help it breathe and get up and get moving around. Calves are pretty resilient for the most part, not necessarily Jersey calves historically, but a healthy calf is going to do really well if you get them dry and you keep them out of a draft. And then if it's really cold out, you want to make sure they've got really deep bedding to nestle down into. If you're worried about it, there are calf coats that you can buy. Some of them are pretty thin and flimsy. Some of them are super heavy duty. You just have to keep kind of look around and see what's going to work for you with your weather. But deep bedding is usually all you need, and then keeping them out of the wind. The newborn does need to get colostrum as soon as possible. I try to get it into them at about an hour old. I will usually feed the colostrum in a bottle so that I know how much the calf is getting. I want them to have ideally at least a half gallon for a mini. They usually don't drink too much more than that. If I can get a quart into them, I feel good. If it's a mid-size, I definitely want to get that half gallon in there. But the calf's ability to absorb what's in the colostrum and the quality of the colostrum changes the longer that time goes on. So no later than 4 hours, ideally. If it's like an emergency situation, you found the calf, you didn't know it was born, you think it's under 4 to 6 hours old, I would go ahead and try to get it some colostrum just to be safe. Once it gets past that 6 hour mark, then you're getting into some danger territory. A calf that doesn't get colostrum is not likely to survive. They're going to not have the antibodies that they need to be able to deal with the illnesses and the weather changes and the stress on their immune system. So they have to get colostrum. Let's see. You could have a good dam. Usually they are, especially Jerseys. They're good moms typically. They're going to lick their calf. They're going to get it dry. They're going to be willing to stand to get the colostrum into the calf. If it's a heifer, then you may have a little bit more trouble to get the colostrum and to get her to let the calf latch on. But I have had a situation with a cow years ago that came from a dairy. She was a terrible mother. She literally, that's how I broke my foot. She was literally trying to ram her calf into the ground when he was born. So I stuck my foot in between her and the calf to try to kick her off of him, to drag him out of the way. I saved him. I didn't save my foot. So it is possible that you have a cow that's crazy. She never did accept her calf that whole lactation. She was sold with the understanding that they would be pulling calves and bottle feeding because she went to a micro dairy. That's not usual. That is not usual. Does somebody have a question? Okay. So you want to make sure that the navel is trimmed to right about 3 inches or so. You don't want it too short and you don't want it too long. You do need to make sure that you dip that in iodine. That'll help it to dry out quickly, because as long as that's open, there's a avenue for bacteria to go into the calf. It's called navel ill when that happens, and it can kill the calf. So you want to get that dried out, but the iodine also kills any germs that may be there or that get onto the navel until it's dry. Clean water and hay should be provided to your calf as soon as it's about a day old. You'll see the calf munching on the hay just right next to its dam. They learn right away that hay is food. And then, of course, access to water is important. You may choose to do calf starter grains, do vaccinations, things like that. So make sure that you contact your vet. I don't feed grains at all. I just do grass fed. So my calves get grass and grass hay and water from birth, and nothing else. Do you guys feed grains at all, Laura? Do you do grains with your cows?
I think Laura had to sign off.
Okay. Do you do grains, Sarah?
No.
Okay. Yeah. If you plan to feed grain to your adult heifer, your adult cows, then I would grain your heifers. But if you want to be grass fed, then it's not necessary. That's a personal choice though. So educate yourself on that. And then of course, start halter training by a month old, ideally, whether it's a bull or a heifer. The sooner you do it, the better. Selling your cow is going to be much like buying your cow. There's a little bit of volume here, but the video is such a perfect example of what you're looking for. See how small she is compared to that gate? So, and here again, we've got another one. She's next to a fence. And so you get kind of an idea for how tall she is. So great pictures are super important when you're selling your cow. See how this is side on. You can see her top line. You can see her feet. You can see the angle of her feet, her udder. You can see all of the stuff that you need to know. And because there's something there to be able to kind of figure out how tall she is, it gives you an example, just like with the cow walking by the gate. There's a size reference there. So you can say, okay, this is definitely a mini that they're trying to sell me because I can see that, or that I'm trying to sell something like a gate, a fence, a person. Let's see, what are some other things I've used? A pallet, because we all know generally about how big a pallet is. So a pallet on end is another thing you can do. With my calves, I take pictures of the calf next to a 5-gallon barn bucket, like those colored ones that are pink and blue and purple and red. I'll take a picture of the calf next to that so that it's a size reference that people are familiar with. So pictures are super important. Ask about, just like you did when you're selling, when you're buying, excuse me, now that you're selling, you're going to want to ask the person that is interested for references, ideally, what their plans are. Try to find out how much pasture they have, what kind of shelters they have, how much experience they have. You may not necessarily want to sell a heifer or a bull calf to someone that doesn't have some experience. Certainly they should have the proper fencing to contain their animal and keep it safe. And I put it in there because it's important to me that the loyalty when I'm selling my cows, it lies with my cow, not to the people that are contacting me to buy a cow. I am the only person that is looking out for her well-being and making sure that she's going to a home that's going to love and appreciate her and provide her everything that she needs. I'm the only person, right? There's no one else out there that is as concerned about this cow as I am. So making sure that they've got what they need and that they have the support that they need, it's really important. There's only one chance to be able to do that. So you want to have a couple conversations by either email or on the phone and get a feel for who they are and what they plan to do with the cow. If they're asking for a cow that is lower production, but then you find out that they have a very large family, they may not understand what their milk demands are going to be, and they may need a cow that's a mid-size or 2 small cows to be able to provide for a family that say has 5 or 6 kids. But if it's a retired couple and they don't plan to be making a lot of cheese or yogurt, they don't plan to sell, they just want to provide milk for their fridge, then a lower production animal might suit them better. One that's not super high strung might suit them better. So kind of getting a feel for the situation, knowing your cow, her temperament, her training. Some cows are a little bit more feisty than others. Some cows, they're a little more laid back. Maybe they're a little quieter, a little more shy, lower in the pecking order in the herd. Those kinds of things can help you find the right situation for your cow. Let's see, the buyer usually pays for the health certificate and the veterinarian and any extra testing that they want and the transportation to get the cow to their home. So at the beginning, when you were buying the cow, those were the things that you were doing. And then there is a video that we made called Buying and Selling Mini Jerseys, and it goes in depth into both of those things. But do you have any other questions on this? Okay, so if you need more in-depth information, that's where you'll find it there at the YouTube channel. There you go. There's the YouTube channel. Our website, PMJS, it's purebredminijerseys.org. We've got lots of Facebook pages, lots of information.